Modern machines, factories, and railroads required vast sums of money that no one person or private group of investors could provide, giving rise to a new form of business, the corporation.
People pooled their money, pooled their resources, and were able to therefore make themselves much more powerful than any one individual could have managed on their own. And with that power, they formed large corporations which exploited natural resources and exploited, too often, the workers who they brought in to do the labor for them.
By gaining control of each step of production, or by taking control of a market for a single product, a handful of corporations squeezed out smaller competitors.
Companies began to buy up one another, especially in the 1890s, with the result that many of the companies we know today begin to dominate their fields. Some of them grew large simply by hiring more workers. Others grew large by buying out the competition.
By the 1890s, Scottish immigrant Andrew Carnegie produced more than 60% of America's steel. And the Standard Oil Company of John D. Rockefeller, or Rockefeller as his critics called him, controlled 95% of the nation's oil refining business.
They were captains of industry. They did put together the first huge modern corporations, and they organized economic life in new ways that increased the overall wealth of the country.
Have not great merchants, great manufacturers, great inventors done more for the world than preachers and philanthropists? Can there be any doubts that cheapening the costs of necessities and conveniences of life is the most powerful agent of civilization and progress? Charles E. Perkins, president of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad.
But at the same time, they were robber barons in a way, because they took the lion's share of the wealth, and they were certainly great conspicuous spenders, living lavishly, lighting their cigars with $100 bills at lavish banquets and building huge mansions in Newport, Rhode Island, and so forth.
I am a citizen of the United States, born in the state of Vermont, producer of petroleum for over 30 years and refiner of same for 20 years. But my refinery has been shut down during the past 3 years owing to the powerful and all-prevailing machinations of the Standard Oil Trust in criminal collusion and conspiracy with the railroads to destroy my business of 20 years of patient industry, toil, and money.
When George Rice testified before the U.S. Industrial Commission in 1899, he spoke for many others who discovered that big business was no place for the weak of heart. Riches sometimes went to the boldest and least principled, such as railroad speculator Jay Gould, whose corrupt practices sank the Erie Railroad and set off a financial panic in 1873 that saw 5,000 businesses close their doors and 500,000 workers lose their jobs. Other captains of industry like Carnegie and Rockefeller would become philanthropists, devoting some of their vast personal fortune to the support of education, charities, and the arts. Whether these men did the country more good or harm, there was no doubt that industrialization was growing at a mind-boggling pace.
In 1875, we lagged behind the other industrializing nations, most notably Britain, Germany, and France. There was such spectacular industrial growth between 1875 and 1900 that in 1900 we were number one. And we were so far ahead number one that you could take everything that Great Britain produced and France produced and Germany produced together, and it was less than what the United States could produce. 35% of all the manufactured goods produced in the world were being produced in the United States by 1900.